Welcome to Evil Unmasked, where the shadows of history reveal their darkest secrets. I'm your host, Sierra Elizabeth. As a criminal justice and criminology graduate, I've always been drawn to the mysteries that lurk beneath the surface of everyday life. This podcast is dedicated to uncovering and discussing the truth behind some of the most chilling and intriguing cases in true crime history. In each episode, we'll deep dive into a different case, exploring the evidence, unraveling the clues, and bringing you the stories of the victims and the relentless pursuit of justice. From infamous serial killers to unsolved mysteries, no case is too complex or too obscure for me to tackle. For this episode, I wanted to dive into a 65-year-old case that is still ongoing. Join me as we unveil the crime and delve into the mind of a criminal. This is Evil Unmasked. Let's begin. Alright guys, so this took place a long time ago, so I apologize. I'm going to be butchering a lot of these names. On February 25th, 1957, a young muskrat hunter was checking his traps in the woods along Susquehanna Road, a narrow country road in the Fox Chase section of northeast Philadelphia. The southern side of the road was lightly wooded, with trees extending a few yards from the road, beyond which lay open fields and scrub growth ideal for small game like rabbits and muskrats. While tending to his traps, the hunter stumbled upon a cardboard box. Inside, he discovered the body of a young boy, naked and mutilated. Fearing repercussions for his illegal traps, the hunter didn't report his gruesome discovery and left the boy's body alone in the woods. The next day, February 26, 1957, a college student wandering through the same wooded area found the boy's body in the box. There were no houses on Susquehanna Road, but there was one notable building on the corner of the north side, the Sisters of the Good Shepherd School. Across from the school, the thickly wooded area with a dense underbrush was where the young boy's body was discovered, twice. The boy appeared to be between 3 and 7 years old and showed signs of severe neglect. He was small, malnourished, and unkempt. His hair had been cut around the time of his death, with clumps still clinging to his nude body. He had several bruises visible all across his body, and he was wrapped in a cheap flannel blanket, lying face up inside the large cardboard box. His body was dry and clean, his arms carefully folded across his stomach. No recent reports of a missing child had been filed, so the police took his fingerprints, hoping for a match, but nothing was found. Hundreds of thousands of flyers were distributed to surrounding areas, pleading for any information about the unidentified boy, yet no one came forward. His parents never claimed him, and the boy remained unidentified. During the autopsy, it was determined that the boy was white with blue eyes, pale skin, and was between the ages of 4 and 6. His hair had been cut crudely close to his scalp, and his finger and toenails seemed to have been recently trimmed as they were short and neat. He was 40.5 inches tall and weighed about 30 pounds, seemingly malnourished. His light brown hair had been cut very close to his head in a crude and hurried way. Clumps of his hair clung to his body, suggesting that it had been cut either shortly before or shortly after he died. He had been severely beaten and had sustained multiple abrasions, contusions, a subdural hemorrhage, and pleural effusions, also known as blunt force trauma. The boy's body was covered in bruises, particularly on his face and head. In addition to the bruises, he had 7 scars, 3 of which appeared to be from surgeries. 2 of these surgical scars were on his chest and groin, and he had another scar on his left ankle, likely from a procedure to expose a vein for an infusion or transfusion. Other scars included a 1.5-inch scar on the left side of his chest, a round scar on his elbow, and an L-shaped scar on his chin. He had no vaccination scar and was circumcised. The boy had 3 small moles on the left side of his face, 1 below his right ear, 3 on the right side of his chest, and a large one on his right arm above the wrist. He had a full set of baby teeth and was slightly buck-toothed. The palm of his right hand and the soles of both feet were rough-skinned and wrinkled, exhibiting the washerwoman effect, indicating that his hand and feet had been submerged in water for an extended period either just before or right after his death. The medical examiner found evidence of a chronic eye ailment when an ultraviolet light used on his left eye caused it to glow bright blue, suggesting a diagnostic dye had been used. The boy hadn't eaten for at least 2 to 3 hours before his death, and x-rays showed no signs of current or healed bone fractures. Determining the exact time of death was challenging due to the cool weather, It could have been anywhere from 2 to 3 days to 2 to 3 weeks prior to his discovery. During the autopsy, bodily fluids, hair, gastric contents, and tissue samples from the boy's heart, liver, and lungs were collected for toxicological analysis and microscopic examination. A dark brown residue was discovered coating the inside of the boy's esophagus, but it could not be identified. It was believed to be consistent with the boy having vomited shortly before his death. No other significant findings were made. Fingerprints and footprints were also collected to be compared against hospital birth records and medical files. After searching heavily at hospitals nearby, no matching prints were found. The box in which the boy was found in was a large cardboard box stamped with "Fragile." It had originally contained a baby's bassinet sold by J.C. Penney. The box was sent to the FBI lab for analysis, but no clear fingerprints were found. Investigators decided to track down the person who had purchased the bassinet that came in the box. The bassinet was one of a dozen received by J.C. Penney on November 27, 1956, and retailed for $7.50. It was sold between December 3, 1956, and February 16, 1957, at the J.C. Penney located at 100 South 69th Street, Upper Darby, Philadelphia. The store had a cash-only policy at the time, so no records existed to identify the purchaser. Eventually, all of the bassinets and boxes were accounted for, except for one, which provided no leads. The flannel blanket that the boy was wrapped in was made of an inexpensive cotton with a plaid design featuring green, rust brown, and white diamonds. It appeared to have been sewn with low-quality cotton thread, most likely on a home sewing machine. Additionally, the blanket had been cut in half. A man's cap was found 17 feet from the boy's body. The cap was royal blue, made of corduroy, with a leather strap and a buckle at the back. It was a size 7 and had tissue paper inside to maintain its shape. Despite being sent to the FBI for analysis, nothing was found on the cap, but they did trace its origin. The cap was made by Robbins Bald Eagle Hat and Cap Company, located at 2603 South 7th Street, Philadelphia. Miss Hannah Robbins, the owner, said the cap was one of 12 made before May of 1956. She recalled that the hats had originally been without straps, but a man had asked her to sew one on when he bought it. According to Miss Robbins, the man resembled the dead boy's photo, had blonde hair, was in his late 20s, and wore working clothes. This man was never tracked down. Other evidence found near the scene included a tan child-sized scarf, a yellow flannel shirt, and a pair of black children's shoes in good condition. Although investigators attempted to fit the shoes on the unidentified boy, they were far too large. Additionally, a torn, stained blanket and a dead cat wrapped in a gray men's sweater were discovered a quarter-mile from where the boy was found. The blanket, similar in type and quality to the one found with the boy, was analyzed and determined not to be connected. Shortly after the boy's body was found, a man told police that on Sunday, February 24, 1957, he was driving and saw a car stopped on the side of Susquehanna Road with a woman and a child standing by their trunk. It seemed that the woman was grabbing something from the trunk. The witness slowed down to ask them if they needed any help, and both the woman and the child turned their backs to him without saying a word, seemingly trying to hide their license plate. The man drove off. The relentless effort to identify the boy persisted. Investigators scoured orphanages and various child care institutions, reaching out to doctors and hospitals. In a poignant attempt, detectives dressed the boy in typical children's clothing and posed him in a sitting position, hoping that a lifelike image may trigger someone's memory and prompt them to come forward. Frank Bender, a renowned forensic sculptor, created a bust of how the boy's father might have looked, hoping to identify anyone who may have known the family or the boy. Bender based the bust on the boy's facial features and was highly respected in his field, having sculpted the bust of the infamous killer John List. If you are unfamiliar with that case, tune in next week for a truly chilling story. Despite thousands of posters plastered throughout the city, photos published in newspapers, and his image included with every gas bill sent to residents, the boy remained unidentified for 65 years. Over the years, many investigators took on the case to try and solve the chilling mystery that haunted the town. Many of those investigators would live and pass away over the years without seeing the case come to any resolution. The FBI became involved in the case in 1998, and the Philadelphia Division of Evidence Recovery Team exhumed the body of the boy in November of 1998 to obtain tissue samples for DNA testing. The body was originally buried in Potter's Field in Philadelphia, where it lay until the FBI exhumed him. He was then placed at Ivy Hill Cemetery, where his headstone read, quote, "America's Unknown Child," End quote. Over the years, investigators tracked down hundreds of promising leads and identified several likely suspects. The first suspect was Frederick J. Benonis, a 26-year-old LaSalle college student who called the police at 10 a.m. on February 26, 1957, to report finding the boy's body. When questioned, he stated that he was driving on Susquehanna Road that afternoon when he saw a rabbit jump into the underbrush. He stopped to chase it and discovered a large cardboard box containing the body. Frederick did not immediately report his discovery, as he had been frequenting the area to spy on the young women at the Good Shepherd School. He began to have second thoughts about staying quiet when he had heard the news of a missing New Jersey child. After speaking with priests at the college he attended, they advised him to contact authorities immediately. After being questioned thoroughly and voluntarily taking a lie detector test, he was cleared as a suspect. Kenneth and Irene Adele Dudley were arrested and jailed in Lawrenceville, Virginia in 1961 for causing the death of their 7-year-old daughter through malnutrition, exposure, and neglect. Intense questioning led them to admitting that they had permitted 6 of their 10 children to die of malnutrition and neglect, disposing of their bodies in various states across the South. They disposed of 2 of the bodies in a lake, and another was dumped at an abandoned phosphate mine. Eventually, investigators found no possible connection to the boy in the box. The Nicoletti family, known as the Foster family, operated a foster home in a large stone house on Moradon Road, 1.5 miles from where the body was found. Arthur and Catherine Nicoletti were a middle-aged couple living with Anna Marie, Catherine's daughter, whom she had had with a previous marriage. The Nicoletti family took boys and girls in for a few weeks to a few years at a time and cared for as many as 25 kids. At the time that the boy in the box was discovered, there were 8 children living at the residence, 5 girls and 3 boys, all of whom were accounted for, and the family was no longer under suspicion. Remington Bristow, an investigator in the medical examiner's office, spent 36 years on the case. He would follow leads that would lead to other parts of the country, even if it meant it was on his own time and at his own expense. The unidentified boy became a lifelong obsession for him, and many investigators agree that if it wasn't for Remington, the case would have been abandoned a long time ago. While researching his own inquiries into the case, his attention became focused on the foster home. In desperation, he sought out help from an elderly New Jersey psychic named Florence Sternfield. Florence claimed that she could identify a person by holding a piece of metal that was connected to that person. Bristow went to visit her, and he brought with him 2 staples from the JCPenney box that the boy was found in. After touching the staples, the psychic told him to look for a large house with a wooden railing and a log cabin on the property, and the children would be playing in it. Bristow would spend months searching for a property that fit that description near where the boy was found, and one day, he found the foster home. Struck by the resemblance of the description given by the psychic, he flew her down to Philadelphia. Florence, the psychic, claimed she had never been to Philadelphia. Bristow brought her to the location where the boy's body was found, and she led him from the discovery site to the foster home. At this point, Bristow was convinced that he was on the right track. In 1961, the Nicoletti family retired from the foster family business and moved away. The home was put up for sale, and Bristow took this opportunity to go to an auction for the furnishings of the home. During the auction at the home, he saw a bassinet similar to the one that was sold by JCPenney, the one that came in the boxes like the one the boy was found in. Outside of the house, he found plaid blankets that had been cut in half to fit the metal cots that the foster children had slept on. There was also a duck pond on the property, which Bristow believed is where the boy's hand and feet could have been submerged underwater. For years, Bristow tried to convince the Philadelphia Police Department to reinvestigate the family, but his requests were never fulfilled. However, in 1984, 2 homicide detectives reluctantly agreed to interview Arthur Nicoletti. When the interview yielded no new information, Bristow encouraged Nicoletti to take a lie detector test, which he refused, further fueling Bristow's suspicions that Nicoletti had something to hide. Bristow believed that the boy might have been the illegitimate son of Arthur Nicoletti and Anna Marie, his stepdaughter. This suspicion was intensified a few years later when Arthur married his stepdaughter after becoming a widower. Bristow passed away in 1993, taking his belief that the foster family was involved in the boy in the box case with him, although he never had any proof. On October 3, 1998, an episode of America's Most Wanted aired, covering the boy in the box case. Following the broadcast, 7 people formed an internet chat group to discuss the case. A woman who had grown up in Philadelphia at the time of the discovery joined the chat. She shared that she had a friend named Diane, who lived on the same street as the foster family and claimed to know a lot about them. According to the woman, Diane had attended grammar school with two of the foster girls and said the foster family had several relatives in the Philadelphia police force who might have helped cover up the boy in the box case. This information was sent to the Vidocq Society, an international organization of crime-solving experts based in Philadelphia. The nonprofit group consists of 82 members with expertise ranging from forensics to law. Upon receiving the information, Vidocq Society Commissioner William Fleischer requested that the woman from the chat contact him by phone immediately. She was extremely reluctant to connect him with her friend Diane, whose abusive husband refused to let her talk to law enforcement. The woman offered to relay Fleischer's questions to Diane and communicate her responses back to him. After some back and forth, Fleischer insisted on speaking to Diane directly. The woman stalled, saying Diane and her husband had gone on a 2-week vacation to Florida. At the end of the 2 weeks, Fleischer contacted the woman again, only to be told that Diane's husband had suffered a mild stroke while they were in Florida and she wouldn't be returning until later. After a few more weeks, the woman informed Fleischer that Diane's husband had suffered another stroke, prompting their permanent move to Florida. Fleischer never got the chance to speak with the elusive Diane, and eventually it became clear to everyone that Diane likely didn't exist and that the woman in the chat was simply seeking attention. In 2002, a businesswoman from Cincinnati, Ohio, who we will call M, contacted investigators through her psychiatrist. M claimed that her abusive mother had bought the unknown boy from his birth parents in 1954. She claimed that her mother physically and sexually abused him for 2.5 years before eventually killing him in a rage after he had vomited in the bathtub. M had originally confessed this to her psychiatrist in 1989, but did not want to speak with law enforcement officials and waited 13 years to do so. Philadelphia detective Tom Augustine was accompanied by Vidocq Society investigators Joseph McGillen and William Kelly on his trip to Cincinnati to interview the woman at her psychiatrist's office. M told them that they lived in Lower Merion, Pennsylvania during the 1950s and that both of her parents worked for the Lower Merion School District. She told investigators that they called the unknown boy Jonathan, who was very frail and mentally handicapped. For 2.5 years, Jonathan was raised in the basement of their home, sleeping in a refrigerator box and using the floor drain as his toilet. He was never allowed to go outside and was never seen by visitors. According to M, the boy was killed in February of 1957. Her mother had cut his long hair to try and hide his identity and trimmed the boy's nails. His nude body was then wrapped in a blanket and placed in the trunk of their car. They drove him to Susquehanna Road and began to remove his body from the trunk. At this time, a male driver unexpectedly stopped and asked them if they needed any help, or if they were having car trouble. M and her mother quickly blocked the plates with their car until the man drove away. This account matched almost exactly with the testimony of an anonymous male witness who had reported this to the police in 1957. Although M's testimony seemed accurate and plausible, her history of mental health problems raised concerns that she might have fabricated the story. Nevertheless, investigators launched an intense investigation to verify her account. 6 months later, their search yielded no corroborating evidence, but investigators are still pursuing this lead. False tips and hopeless leads continued to pour into investigators working on the boy in the box case, but nothing solid was ever found. Despite this, the fight went on. In 2019, the boy's remains were exhumed once again, as modern science offered new hope for identification. On December 6, 2022, after a 65-year mystery, DNA finally provided a name: Joseph Augustus Zarelli, a 4-year-old boy born on January 13, 1953. This revelation marked the biggest break in the case since it began. With this new information, investigators identified the boy's birth mother and father, who were both deceased. However, he did have living siblings whose identities remain confidential to respect their privacy. The investigation into his death remains ongoing, facing numerous challenges due to the passage of time. If you believe you have any information relating to this case, please email americasunnknownchild@vidocq.org. This case still haunts me. No one, not even his parents, came forward to claim that they knew the boy, which leads me to believe that they may have had something to do with his death. It also troubles me that none of the boy's neighbors provided any information about him. This lends some credibility to M's story, as her account of the boy, Jonathan, describes a child no one ever saw. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this case and who you think might be responsible. Join me next time on Evil Unmasked as we continue to explore cases that resonate deeply with us, shedding light on both the darkness and the resilience that emerge in their wake. If you have any case suggestions, questions, or would like to see case teasers, join me on Instagram at evil.unmasked or on X at evil_unmasked.